The Judgement Index is an online analysis tool that measures the value-based behaviour and capacity for judgment that someone has. It measures a raft of things on top of this, including areas of competence and well-being and areas that could be what we class as barriers to performance. The Judgement Index is used as a tool for hiring people, where we can look at the capability frameworks and job specifications of a role, a particular role, and then use relevant indicators that we've measured on someone and map them against that capability area. So we can get a real intricate look at what's important about the job, and does the person have the value-based behaviour and capacity for judgment to do that position. But we can also use the assessment as a development tool. The reason we can do that is because your indicators and the things we measure may shift over time. As your values have changed, as you've grown through life and changed, so will your assessment change over a period of time. It tends not to change overly quick unless there's elements of trauma or major changes happen in your life. But from a coaching point and a development point, it's a fantastic tool to help move people in the direction that they want to go. The data and material we get can be used with teams very effectively in a few ways. One, we can look at the overall strengths of a team or development areas of a team, but other things such as compatibility within the group, where there's likely to be flashpoints. We can look at wellness areas and barriers to performance if a team might be burned out. We can also look at things like assertiveness and who might be difficult, who are the high performers who might get frustrated with people who are less capable in a team. So it really, in a variety of ways, it can be used very successful to develop both engagement and team cohesion. A lot of people ask, what is the Judgement Index? Is it another psychometric assessment? Well, it's not. It's subtly different than a psychometric and most personality profiling tests that are on the market that organisations use. Simple reason is, as we've explained earlier on, that it's a value-based behaviour analysis. So we're not going to measure necessarily personality. However, we will give you elements of character of an individual, but we're going to measure their values and how they're likely to perform within a given environment. Now, a simple example I quite often give is that from a personality profile, you'll get certain types of information. And we never say don't use personality tests. You can get a lot of great information from them. However, this is subtly different. A question you might reflect on yourself. Think of the two best managers you've ever met or worked for in the past. And I would suspect they both had very different personalities. But what they may have had was more likely to have similar values of their work ethic, their tolerance, how they went about the business, and the value-based behaviours would have been very similar. And these are the areas we want to capture when we analyse someone, so we can ensure we get the right person into the right role that will fit that environment. So the Judgement Index is a powerful tool when we get into the recruitment space. Not only will we highlight people who would be a high risk in an environment or not necessarily fit with the role, but we'll also highlight people who will be extremely strong performers and you could use and would probably be highlighted for fast track or succession planning later on down the line. Now, a big impact with the selection of people and the retention of people is actually the onboarding phase of when somebody goes into a new organisation. Now, there's been a lot of research done where we've looked at, where not just us, but other organisations have looked at onboarding techniques, and it's a critical factor in keeping someone, the efficiency and the smoothness of this transition of an individual into an organisation. And some of the areas that we will be able to measure on an individual will be factors around their transition capacity, i.e., are they going to move into that environment relatively trouble-free and deal with the changes around them. But likewise, from an employer's perspective, they will understand very quickly, in fact at the onset, they will understand the strengths and development areas of the individual they get in. And so they can manage that and mentor them effectively into the organisation. This creates a really smooth transition and supports both the new employee and the team or the management team to get the most out of the person they've got. So the Judgement Index is based on the Hartman Value Profile, and that's data, and the origins of this material was put together by Dr. Robert Hartman, who back in the 1930s fled Hitler and the Nazi regime, given he was very outspoken against what was going on in Germany back in those days. One of Hartman's challenges was that he had a deep worry all his adult life about what had gone on in Germany, and he knew that the crux was the values of people, and how could the values of people have been manipulated so effectively by Hitler and the Nazi regime. So he actually ended up as a very successful businessman working for Walt Disney, and in fact was a direct mentor for Disney back in the 40s and 50s. But what he did, he left Disney and went to study and went to Harvard University to try and crack the code to understand the values of people, because he knew this was a key factor in determining good and evil. And if you could understand values, you could perhaps measure it. If you could measure it, you could then maneuver it and use it for good. In 1973, after a period of work, he had designed the assessment, and he was nominated a Nobel Prize for his work in human understanding. Sadly, he died in the year he was nominated the prize, and so never received one, and his work was continued then on for another 40 plus years. So the materials and the assessment is really flexible. It's flexible in the way that we are measuring someone's values, not necessarily measuring a role at a particular time. So what are we simply doing? We're going to extract your values and then map them against a job spec or a role. And these roles could vary. If you think about, you'll need certain values for certain role and certain capabilities in certain environments and different ones in others. And what we're trying to do now is trying to make sure we fit the best fit within that environment and that role. So an example would be, we work a lot with corporate businesses, looking at business leaders, and also looking at, say, sales people or ops and HR people. And there'll be certain roles and given roles that they will require different capabilities and different strengths. And typically we will measure those to get the right fit. Now, taking this as an example, we can do the same in other environments, like medical environments. We've got a raft of information and data on high-performing nurses and care workers from that environment. So again, we know what good looks like, and we tend to come at things looking at two things. One, we will look at the job spec and role capabilities, but two, we'll look at who was operated and who performs well in that environment and measure those people. And given we've got over 40 years experience of research, we've got some real clear patterns of what fantastic looks like and what risk might look like when you're hiring people or developing them if you're using it as a development platform.